Greetings, loves. It is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. Today, I would like to talk about flinch response, specifically in response to firing a gun. This is an issue that throws off the accuracy of the shooter, whether they're new or one of the most seasoned experts out there in the field. It doesn't matter. This eventually plagues everybody, and it is consistently something that you need to try to train around. Now, we need to be able to identify what causes flinch response in the first place, then be able to troubleshoot it, and develop better strategies to overcome it. Again, this is a continual process, so I do think this video is very relevant for anyone who shoots out there. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, first of all, what is flinching exactly? Flinching is a pre-ignition movement caused by the force of the shooter against the firearm in anticipation of recoil while they're pulling the trigger before the round ever leaves the barrel. So basically, in essence, you are simply trying to counter-force the force that is applied against you through recoil by prematurely applying that to the gun before that round ever leaves the gun. As a result, this knocks your rounds off target, it causes a lot of inaccuracies, and generally inconsistent shooting patterns. Now, it's important to underscore that this is a trained response, and therefore we can also train around it. Just like how our brain picks up on patterns and learns how to counteract them, in this case an explosion in your hands, you can also train your brain to be like, no, that's okay, don't worry about it, we can actually time this better and figure out better strategies so that you can more accurately counteract that recoil at the right time instead of the wrong time. In fact, you can really easily demonstrate this with a new shooter. Take a new shooter, teach them the proper stance and grip that they need, make them understand how to aim and pull a trigger, and then have them shoot 3 to 4 shots. Those 3 to 4 shots are probably all going to land very accurately. From there, you're going to start to notice those shots are probably going to start going down lower on the target. That is because their brain is starting to learn this pattern, pick up on more information about when that explosion is going to happen in their hands, and it is also prematurely anticipating it and counteracting it. Now, how do you know if you're even flinching in the first place? Well, there's usually a pretty obvious sign here. Basically, if you know that you're sighted in properly and that your stance and grip and everything is fine and you're not worrying about any significant offsets, so long as you are consistently aiming in the general region of the target, you should generally be hitting the target. Now, if you are landing shots significantly low by some margin or another, and consistently so, then yes, you're probably having some sort of flinch response. This is perfectly normal. Everyone experiences it again, even the most seasoned shooters, and we can correct this. Furthermore, if your shots are tending to the non-dominant side, that also might mean that you don't have enough support hand side grip. Another thing that I'll get into later to help counteract this, but that is generally also a critique of your grip overall. Now, I really need to underscore that this is not a newbie problem. This is a literally everyone who shoots guns problem. We have little monkey brains that don't like explosions going off in our hands, so naturally we're always going to have some aptitude to flinch one way or another when we're shooting a gun. That's just the bottom line. Now, the most experienced shooters out there usually overcome this pretty well because they're aware of this problem, they know exactly how to train around it, and they actively train around it. That's what makes the difference, not the fact that a newbie just happens to have this flinch response, because we all do. So, as always, continually assess why you're flinching, figure out the good strategies that work for you to counteract it, and implement those so that you can become a better shooter. Okay, now what are some strategies that we can start to utilize to overcome flinch response? Well, the first and probably most important one is trigger prep. Essentially, this comes through applying a certain amount of pressure on the trigger to reduce the travel of the trigger and pressure to make the shot. If you don't take up enough slack but think you have, your brain will prematurely anticipate the shot. You must familiarize yourself with your trigger pull by touch. This largely comes through slow, intentional dry fire with proof at the range. Work from 0 to 100% of your trigger pull and start to learn when you're at 99% to reduce the window in which you can flinch. Furthermore, you should be making mistakes here. You should fire early when you perceive that you're at 99% but you're really at 70%, and this can even go the other way. You can think you're at 99% but you're really at 120%, the gun's already gone off and you're just late on controlling that recoil. That's a different issue that we're going to talk about a different day, but basically just understand that this really does go both ways. Now, essentially, as a proof of concept here, you should be able to pull that gun's trigger with the most minimal grip in the world and still have fairly consistent and accurate shots. Basically, hold that gun one-handed, apply as little of your hand to it to hold it, and then try to pull that trigger as evenly as possible. If you are successful, yes, your shots should be accurate and within some reasonable level of consistency. No, this isn't the way you should be training, and no, there's no technique here that would ever require you to do this, but it is a really good proof of whether or not you have overcome flinch response through proper staging of the trigger. Now, once you're fairly confident that you have overcome flinch response, it's time to ditch the slow fire. You can't just keep pulling that trigger as slow as you can. That is simply a building block for the fundamentals that will get you where you want to go in your training. Start incorporating multiple strings of fire. Start trying to shoot as fast as you can. You should be slamming that trigger back, and you should be doing lots of shots as fast as you can while still maintaining some modicum of reasonable accuracy and consistency. Once you do that, that is when you start to really level up. Furthermore, you should try to be dynamic. You can't just keep shooting from the same static position forever. Sometimes you should be able to move. You should be able to shoot from different angles and different positions. You should train to draw and stage that trigger, and incorporate all of these things into your normal regimen. Now, another exercise I like to incorporate at the range to overcome flinch response is called ball dummy. Essentially, while you're doing live fire exercises, have a friend randomly mix in some snap caps or dummy rounds in a magazine full of live rounds and then hand it to you. You're not going to know where all those things are in relation to each other. You're simply going to have a bunch of nasty surprises as you pull that trigger. Some shots are going to go bang, and they're going to produce a recoil response. Your brain is probably going to react to it, and then others are simply not going to do anything at all, but your brain will still react to it, and you're going to dip your gun down, and it's going to be hilarious because it's very obvious. You're essentially shaming yourself into correcting this kind of response. Now, there's no real shame in this because we all experience it, but essentially you are just trying to humble yourself into knowing that there is a problem in the first place, identifying that problem, and being very conscious and methodical in your following shots to overcome this. Now, it's really important to note that just because you see the gun move after pulling the trigger doesn't necessarily mean that you're experiencing a flinch response. Yes, if the gun moves before it goes click, then yes, there is some pre-ignition movement of the gun and your shots are probably going to land low. If it moves after it goes click, then this is probably just a proper response to anticipating recoil and timing it correctly so that you can counteract that force. That's a good thing. That's a thing that you don't want to untrain from yourself. What's important here is identifying when you are moving the gun and why you're moving the gun. If there's any doubt, again, the proof is in the pudding. All those live rounds that you're sending down range are going to tell you exactly whether or not you're doing this. Another exercise I like to do is simply loading the magazine yourself and alternating between live and dummy rounds. This essentially just proves to your brain what proper trigger pull looks like. When you hit that dummy round, you know it's not going to go off. You don't need to worry about it. There's no sweat or pressure. You can just give it a nice squeeze on the trigger and it shouldn't move. If it does, then yes, your flinch response is like crazy high and you need to really work on this, but that's okay. Furthermore, if you are actually doing a nice even trigger pull on the snap cap, then you have proven to your brain what you want to be doing. You then move on to the live round and you just try to repeat the same thing over and over and over again. This is simply training your brain what to look for, how to do it, and to keep doing it. Another really simple thing that you can do to help counteract flinch response is to just make sure that you have a good stance and grip, particularly your support hand side grip. Now, this doesn't directly stop you from flinching at all. It doesn't directly address the issue, but it does give you some padding to help you reduce the effects of a flinch response. Essentially, yes, you're eventually going to slip up. You're going to start to flinch as you shoot a gun. That's just going to happen eventually, no matter how much you pay attention to this and train. So as a result, just making sure that you're evening the odds here, making sure that you're practicing both your flinch response techniques as well as just simple fundamentals here is going to go a very long way. If you have a very strong support hand side grip, that gives you that much less room for that gun to move due to your flinching. As always, practice everything, incorporate all this in your training, make sure you're sticking to your fundamentals, and build on it from there. Shooting handguns is not always easy, and flinch response just simply comes with it. But so long as you're practicing your fundamentals, so long as you are aware of this and incorporating training to counteract it on a consistent basis, you're going to become a much, much more effective shooter. It's not about overcoming flinch response once forever and you're good. It's about staying on top of it because it is constantly a factor that you're going to have to battle. So hopefully this video was useful to you all out there. If you did appreciate it, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments below if you have any as well, so don't be shy. I also want to give a shout out to all my MVPs on Patreon. I really couldn't do any of this without you. This channel completely relies on your support. So if you do want to go help chip in, you can always go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. The biggest contributors are named at the end of the video. Happy shooting! I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there. And as always, please take care. Bye!